so much for joining us today, and those who are joining by webcast as well. It's a little bit different this year, prepping for back to school, and you're in a different situation. Your school supplies look different. Everything's changed. You know, we're having to buy masks for our kids, or some of them are doing virtual learning. Educators are having to navigate all this and figure out what to do. So I look at this and I see nothing but opportunity for the kingdom of God to advance. I don't look at this and say, well, we've got these obstacles here. This is the time for us to retreat or to slow down or to take a break. I look at this and say, maybe God's setting something up here. Maybe God's got everything under control. Perhaps He is awakening and making the church ready for revival like we've never seen before. And so even though it's a little bit different this year, I believe we serve a God without limitations. And today I want to talk to you about no limits. No limits. A God with no limits. Acts chapter 17, verse 24. I'll be reading from the NIV. It may look a little different. Paul is preaching a sermon on Mars Hill. He says, "The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by human hands." He calls out the philosophers of his day who had built these temples, and they worshiped their gods in these temples, and they brought sacrifices. He says, my God doesn't reside in a little spot in the corner of your world. My God can't be contained. And so in verse 25, "And he's not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands." God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. And I love verse 28, "For in him we live and move and have our being." As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. In him we live and we move and we have our being. By ourselves, I have limitations. By ourselves, I look at the limits around me. This school year is surrounded by limitations, and there are things that are so much different. You can't get too close to someone. You have to wear a mask. You have to, there's all these limitations to what we can do. But in him, there's no limitations. There's no mountain too great. There's nothing that he cannot do. There is nothing that's beyond his reach. There's nothing that's beyond his grasp. In him we live and we move and we have our being. In him is promises forever. In him is eternal life. In him is everything that we need. And so I'm not going to be bound by limitations this year, but I'm trusting that he's going to take the limits off the church and let us continue to move and walk in his favor and bring the light and the hope of this gospel into our school hallways and change the world. I believe that. Thank you for standing with me this morning. You can be seated. We have limits. We do. We have limits. And as time progresses, you start to learn your limitations. We laugh at Dad because recently he tried to get out and play basketball with us, and his mind is still, he's still in the game here. But there's some limitations. We have to tape up those ankles sometimes and help him stay on the court. We have limits, and as we go through life, we learn our limits, and we learn our boundaries, and I can't do what I used to do here anymore. I'm not as young, or I'm not, where we learn our limitations, and I know that the school year has kicked off, and it's going to be a very different school year. I had to take care of my nephew this week. He was staying with me, so I was the one bringing him to and from school, and I had to bring his supplies to the school. Brennan's in the 6th grade. And it just shows you how bad of an uncle I am. Because I rolled up and they said, well, what grade's he in? I said, I think he's in 3rd grade. I'll make sure y'all got his supplies. And they looked, they checked their chart, and of course they see 6th grade, and they look back at me like, is this guy, what is going on here? I'm like, I'm the uncle. I don't know anything about what I'm doing. I'm just in charge this week. I'm sorry, I'm the uncle. I have no clue what I'm doing. So obviously, I thought he was in the 3rd grade. He's in 6th now. That's how life works. But we have limitations, and this year we see those limitations. I want to give you I know that if you've already been in school this week, the last thing you want is a science lesson. But I want to give you a science lesson because I think it will help you to understand just how I love these things. It helps me to get my mind around just how great God is. I want to share with you a few of the things that demonstrate just how rare it is that we're even in this room right now. Well, the fact that we're here this morning is a miracle. The fact that you and I woke up with breath in our lungs today is a miracle. It's absolutely a miracle. So the astrophysicist Hugh Ross, he studies these things, and this is what he does, and he points out, he's a Christian, so he points out that the probability of our life on earth is so rare and so unique. When people say, if God is real, why doesn't he just show up in the clouds and say, I'm here? And Hugh Ross was like, he's already done that. He's already done that, and I want to give you a few examples of why. So we should not exist today. Let's just start with the size of our planet. If the Earth were just a little bit larger, gravity would be dramatically affected. We wouldn't all just weigh more. We could all, some of us I could lose a little weight. I don't want to weigh more. But we wouldn't all just weigh more, but the gas in the atmosphere would even become more dense. Ammonia and methane gas would increase, and we're not able to breathe those things in. So if the Earth were just slightly larger, and when I say slightly, I mean slightly. I can't go through, I'm not a scientist, but I can just tell you, if we were just slightly larger, we wouldn't exist here today. Of course, there are people who say, well, we would evolve and develop a resistance to these gases. The problem is that's more science fiction than fact. Life can't coexist with those large amounts of gases in the atmosphere. If the Earth were slightly smaller, gravity would decrease and water vapor would dissipate into the atmosphere. Our bodies are 75% water. We couldn't live without water if the Earth were just slightly smaller. And it should mean something to us that if the size of the Earth were slightly smaller or larger, we wouldn't be here. Maybe you're like me, there's not enough time in the day. Caught yourself saying that recently? Just not enough time. These 24-hour days fly by when you're busy with school or with work. But if our days were slightly, just even a little bit longer, the nighttime cold would increase dramatically as well as the daytime heat. So much so that life wouldn't exist on this planet. Just a little bit more time in the day might wipe us all out. So I'm glad we don't have that much more time in the day. Another critical factor for life on Earth depends on the largest planet in our solar system, Jupiter. Without this big, giant planet in our solar system, the Earth would constantly be struck by comets and debris about 1,000 times more frequently. I think of Jupiter as like the offensive lineman who's protecting the quarterback, all right? Since Jupiter is composed of gas, it's not nearly as dense as Earth, but still it has 318 times the amount of density as the Earth, and therefore 318 times the gravity. So comets that come anywhere near Jupiter are pulled toward it. It absorbs most of them into gaseous depth without even a hiccup. And what's even more extraordinary and beneficial to the Earth is seen almost every night when we look up at the sky at our moon. The moon stabilizes the Earth's rotational axis. And if the moon weren't precisely the right size and distance from the Earth, the axis would have changed over the eons, making life impossible. The exact location of the moon makes life possible. Most scientists now believe that the moon didn't form until 250 million years after the Earth. It's believed that the Earth was in a molten state and was much, much smaller. Then out of nowhere, a planetary body traveling through space collided with this molten state that Earth was in. And this thing that collided with Earth was just about the size of Mars. And this is where Earth became Earth. Because of this collision, the size of the Earth became precisely what it is today. And the remaining chunks of that collision began orbiting around the Earth until they coalesced and formed the moon. Without this collision, life on Earth would have never began to exist. The previous atmosphere on Earth was 40 times as thick as our current atmosphere. After the collision, the Earth's new atmosphere was capable of supporting life. Earth's iron was increased dramatically by this collision, which in turn allowed marine life to flourish, which in turn allowed life on land to begin to flourish, according to these scientists. For this collision to happen, two objects had to meet that were extremely far apart. It would be like two people on the opposite sides of the Grand Canyon firing a pistol towards one another, and the bullets would have to meet exactly head-on to cancel out each other's momentum and to drop to the bottom of the canyon. If the collision had been slightly off, or if the two planets missed each other by just a hair, we would not be here today. That's evidence to me of a creator who's in charge, who's guiding and sustaining the earth that we live in today. That's evidence to me of a miracle. When people say, where's miracles? Where's the God of the miracles? I look at this and I say, there it is. I'm here. I'm breathing. I'm alive. Because of these small factors, I'm alive today. What are the limitations again for our God? What are the limitations again that he can't? What are the mountains he can't move? What are the things that God cannot do? If these things happen just so I could be here today. And maybe God's allowed me to be here for a reason. Maybe God has a plan for my life. Maybe all of these things didn't happen by coincidence, but maybe there was a God that intelligently designed these things and controlled and sustained the earth. And maybe he has a plan for each and every one. Maybe we're not here by a big accident and our life ends and that's it. Maybe from the beginning of time, God orchestrated a divine plan for your life. And so these limitations that we see are nothing compared to the plan that he has for your life. So we can take the limits off this year and realize we serve an unlimited God. There are no limits. You're special. You shouldn't be here today, but you are here. And these things I mentioned are just small in comparison to what God is actually capable of. But by recognizing our limits, by pointing out the fact that if there were just a few minute differences in the atmosphere, I wouldn't even exist, I can begin to get a picture of just how unlimited my God is. The fact that we not only exist, but we can know our Creator and he can live within us means that when we connect to him, there are just no limits to what he can do through us. It's not that we're going to do amazing things. It's that God is going to use you to do something this year. It's that God can work through you. There are no limits to what God can do. There's no limits to what he can do. 2 Corinthians 12:9, Paul has griped and complained about his weakness. He has wrestled with his own weakness. But he says, and he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee. My strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake. Why? Because when I am weak, then I am strong. By recognizing my limits, by recognizing that I'm weak, I am just setting up for his glory. By recognizing the limitations in our own nation right now, this is a big setup for the glory of God. This is a big setup for just to show what he can do in the middle of weakness, in the middle of adversity, in the middle of trial. It's to show what he can do, not what I can do. Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the earth. In the heavens God has pitched a tent for the sun. It's like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, like a champion rejoicing to run his course. It rises at one end of the heavens and makes its circuit to the other. Nothing is deprived of its warmth. The law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, giving joy to the heart. The commands of the Lord are radiant, giving light to the eyes. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The decrees of the Lord are firm, and all of them are righteous. He's a God of order. He's a God of direction. He's not a God of coincidence or accident. He's a God of purpose and a God with a divine plan. And if I look above and I know that he has orchestrated and finely tuned this universe so I can be here, why on earth would I question that he has a plan or a divine purpose for my life? He has a plan. So what are we limited by this school year? I know COVID has hit our nation. I know it's changed the way students and teachers navigate education, but that's not a limit that's too great for God. I know in some places throughout the world, particularly on the college campus, Christian values are being challenged, and professors are challenging your faith. And I'm asking you as a Christian to step up and respond to those challenges. Don't ignore those things. Study out your faith. Know why you believe what you believe, and have a response ready. Always be willing to give an answer to those that ask of the hope that is within you. Be ready to step up to the plate. There's not a limit that can be put on our God. There's no intellectual challenge too great for our God. There's no physical challenge too great for our God. There's nothing that is too great for the God that we serve. Yes, we have limitations. You may be thinking, I'm not the smartest person in the world. I'm not the most talented person in the world. I'm not. But by recognizing your limitations, you are a perfect candidate for God's glory. By saying, you know what, I'm not everything, but He has it all under control. You become a perfect candidate for His glory. There are no limits to what our God can do, although we have limitations. It would be nice if we didn't have limitations. I wish we didn't. The disciples, they walked with Jesus. They saw the miracles. He was their friend. They spent great time with Him. And they had been with Him for a great period of time. But imagine how they felt in John 14:28. Jesus says plain and simple, I'm going away. Imagine the turn. They have just seen this man be crucified, and He's rose again from the grave, and now He's walking beside them. They have seen Him conquer death. And He says, all right, I'm going away. It's your turn now. I can't imagine the disappointment. You just got here. There's so much more we could do. Imagine if we just paraded you through the streets and showed everyone how great you are. You've conquered death. He says, no. That's not my plan. It's your turn. It's your turn now to take on the mission. But what's ironic about that is when it became their turn, that's when they begin to turn the world upside down. That's whenever they begin to turn the world upside down, because things shifted when they recognized their limitations but trusted God to shatter the limits of what's possible. Unfortunately, we don't get to decide what life throws our way. Life can sometimes be bitter. I'm reminded of Starbucks people. I don't know if you know anybody who's a coffee fanatic. They're sometimes hard to be around if they're coffee people. Now, I am a coffee person. I drink coffee every day. But I'm talking about the person who speaks like coffee lingo. Y'all know they have a different language. If you go to a coffee shop and you try to order something, you know, there's macchiatos and there's cappuccinos and there's lattes and there's all these things. And I don't know what half of it means. I usually get to the order to order, and I'm like, just something that tastes good, right? I mean, I don't know. I don't understand the language. My wife is a expert coffee orderer. She's really good at it. We were on vacation a couple weeks ago, and my cousin was making a Starbucks run, and she texted and said, what would you guys like? And I texted back, I wanted an iced black coffee. Can you just get, and everybody's like, gross, man, why do you drink that? I just like black coffee. I don't know. I've been drinking it forever, and I don't mind if it's cold. I like it cold, too, especially on a hot day, an iced black coffee. My wife is, just thinks it's disgusting. Like, what's wrong with it? She's going to Starbucks. They have so many flavors and creams and syrups they can put into the coffee. Why would you drink bitter black coffee? And I said, well, what do you want? Well, get me a matcha green tea latte. That's the kind of language I'm talking about that they speak. It's a different language. I'm like, is the Spirit moving? What's she talking about? Matcha green tea latte. Is that a different language? Like, what's going on here? I'd never heard of it. So, I threw out the only call. Did you say mocha? Mocha? Are you talking about mocha? She said, no, matcha. She did that thing where she, spell out the whole word. M-A-T-C-H-A. These are the kind of coffee people I'm talking about, and they're hard to be around sometimes, But I guarantee you people would rather drink that fancy drink that she's talking about than drink that cold, bitter black coffee that I just love and cherish so much. I guarantee you that. I also drink sparkling water. People think there's something wrong with me when I tell them that. I drink bitter drinks. I don't know what's wrong with me. Maybe my taste buds are just confused or different than yours. I don't know. But wouldn't it be nice if life were like Starbucks, where we could say, you know what, I want a caramel frappuccino, put the whipped cream on top. I want it to, be in the refrigerator for 3 minutes, and I want you to take it out and let it, whatever. Wouldn't life be easier if it was like that? But instead, sometimes life just hands you a cold cup of bitter coffee. It's black coffee. I mean, sometimes we just don't get to decide. We don't get to order our life exactly how we want it to, and it seems like it can be bitter sometimes. It can be difficult sometimes. Life doesn't always come with whipped cream and sprinkles on top. Everything can be a lot more difficult, and the Bible warns us to expect, not just it might happen, but expect perilous times in our life. But even in that, remember who put the stars in motion. Remember who sustains every breath that you take. Remember who orchestrated the galaxy and trust that he has no limitations to what he can do. If he made that galaxy, if he made those stars, if he put Jupiter in the precise place to protect the earth, if he put the moon precisely in the place so that we can live, if he set the laws of gravity, the laws of motion in place so that you and I can live, where did he make that from? Out of nothing, out of emptiness, out of absolutely nothing. What can he do with something? If he can create all that out of nothing, and you say, you know what, I don't have much, but I'm somebody. All I have is this. If he can make all that out of nothing, there's no telling what he can do with you. If he can create all of that out of nothing, there's no telling what he can do with your life. You are not alone. You're not alone. It's a lonely time. Social distancing, these are the buzzwords of 2020. We hear that a lot. It's a lonely time. We feel disconnected from other people. I want to remind you, you're not alone. John 14:23, Jesus replied, anyone who loves me will obey my teaching. My Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them. And anyone who does not love me will not obey my teaching. These words you hear are not my own. They belong to the Father who sent me. All this I have spoken while still with you. But the Advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you all things and will remind you of everything I've said to you. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Do not be afraid. His Spirit is with you. His Spirit is with you. Yes, he was leaving the disciples, but they were setting up for an upper room experience. They were setting up for what happens in Acts chapter 2. When he says, I am leaving, I'm going, but I will send the Comforter. But I will put something inside of you that will give you power. I will walk with you whenever there's adversity. I will walk with you through trial. That's what he's reminding us of. You're not alone. Max Lucado told a story. I think it serves a good example of God's faithfulness. There was a little boy named Timmy, and it was school time for Timmy. Just like you, he was getting ready for school. It was his first day at school, and his mom was a little bit protective of Timmy. Anybody have a mom like that? My mom would walk me all the way to my classroom, meet every teacher in the, I had one of those moms. And then I would beg her to take me home, and she wouldn't. Still trying to get over that. But Timmy would walk into school, and it was his first day, and his mom walked him all the way to school, and some of the kids started to give Timmy a hard time. Here comes Mama's boy, and she's got to walk him all the way to school. So they gave Timmy a little bit of a hard time and teased him about his mom being so protective. So Timmy went home and he told his mom, look, hey, I don't want you to walk me all the way to school. Could you ease back a little bit? The other kids, they're giving me a hard time. I need you to back off just a little bit. I don't want you following me to school. So she did her best to give him some independence. And every morning before he left for school, she would pray over him. And she would read the 23rd Psalm, and she would get to that scripture, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Pray that over Timmy. And one day, Timmy's mom came up with a new plan, because moms are crafty. She came up with a new plan to keep an eye on him. There was another neighbor who also walked her daughter to school, and she said, listen, keep an eye on my boy. You'll see him across the street. Just while you're walking your child, you keep an eye on Timmy for me, please. And so she did. She kept an eye on him. And after a few days, one of Timmy's friends started to catch on. Why is this lady looking at us, Timmy? Why is she watching us as we walk to school? And he said, Timmy, do you know who that is that's following us? Timmy said, sure. That's Shirley Goodness, and that's her daughter, Marcy. Mom tells me every morning they're going to follow me, and I just got to get used to them now. Look, even when you don't recognize it, even when it doesn't seem like God is with you in the middle, he's still with you. Trust me, there's going to be times where we begin to question and wonder, God, why are you allowing this to happen? But he's so faithful and he's so good that he continues to walk with us even when we don't deserve it, even when we haven't earned it. He's still with us. Even when I'm in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. I'm not alone. And guess what? My God has no limits. My God has no limits. I'm closing. God sees beyond your limits. He can see beyond your limits. He can see your potential of what would happen if you would invite him to walk with you. In 1972, NASA launched the exploratory space probe Pioneer 10. This satellite had a mission to reach Jupiter, photograph its moons, and beam data it collected about this giant planet back to Earth. Scientists regarded this as a bold plan. We're going to launch this satellite. It's going to go all the way to Jupiter, and it's going to take these pictures, and it's going to send them back to Earth. And up to that point, no satellites have been able to go beyond Mars. So they feared the asteroid belt would destroy the satellite before it even get to Jupiter. They didn't even know if this mission was possible. Spent a lot of money to prepare this satellite. But Pioneer 10 accomplished its mission, and it accomplished a lot more than that. It flew past Jupiter in November 1973, continued its incredible journey toward the edge of our solar system at 1 billion miles from the sun. Pioneer 10 passed Saturn. At some 2 billion miles, it passed Neptune, and at 3 billion miles, it passed Pluto, and at 4 billion miles, it continued to travel. By 1997, 25 years after its launch, Pioneer 10 was more than 6 billion miles from the sun. Though now nearly 8 billion miles from the sun, the satellite kept sending signals. Last one received in 2002, 30 years after its launch. The point is, they thought it would only make it to Jupiter, and it continued to blow their expectations. Commenting on the Pioneer 10 in Time magazine, Leon Giraffe says, perhaps most remarkable is the fact that those signals emanate from an 8-watt transmitter, which radiates about as much power as a bedroom nightlight and takes more than 9 hours to reach Earth. That's amazing that sometimes we're so cynical about our own limitations, about what we can do, when God says, I'm going to take you further than you even know. I'm going to take you beyond just the limitations that you see. I'm going to take you deeper than you ever could have imagined. I want to take you even further. We underestimate our potential. There are students in our youth group, and I mention this every back-to-school year service because I think it's important. There are some in our youth group that have launched into Bible studies in their schools. One had 80-plus students a few years ago at Tioga High School. We had one at Grace Christian School that launched one during lunch and had several students at Grace Christian School. We had another one at Grant High School. I've seen student after student in our youth ministry say, you know what, I can do this. And these people would surprise you because they would tell you, I didn't think that I could accomplish it, but God was up to something so much more. We had a Bible study. I see the Zito's got a packed house. We got the whole athletic team here with us today. But we had a Bible study at their home not too long ago. Several students just packed into a room asking questions about God, asking questions about our faith, asking questions about why we believe what we believe or do what we do. That's not an accident or a coincidence. It's just that people determine, you know what, I don't have to have it all together. I don't have to have it all figured out. I just have to have a love and passion for people and for God. I just got to have a love and passion for the people I'm serving, and He'll take care of the rest. I don't have to know how He's going to make a way. I just know He's going to make a way. And I trust in Him, and I follow Him, and I respond to the call. The God who put all life in motion cares about your calling. He wants to use you, not next year, not when everything's easier, not when there's no limitations, but He wants to use you now. He wants to use us now in the world that we exist in today. He wants to work in this world, in this time, in this season, right now. And I'm believing for that. Why don't you stand with me? We're just going to worship Him for a moment. And then I'm going to have Pastor come and pray over our students and our teachers. We're we're going to worship him for a moment. If you're watching by webcast, feel free to worship with us, and Pastor's going to come and pray. But why don't we just worship the God of no limitations? Why don't we just worship the God of no limits? And just begin to surrender to whatever he has for us this year. Whatever it is, God, I surrender. I throw my hands up and surrender. You are a God without limitations. You are a God that cannot be contained. You are a God that's beyond description. And today, I'm just here to worship you. I surrender everything to you, and I trust in you. Let's let him move here for a moment.